Buenos días a todos, bienvenidos al evento de América Sostenible. Mi nombre es Juan Fernando Montenegro y los estaré acompañando en el track de Salud y Bienestar. La siguiente conferencia es en inglés, por lo que si requieren interpretación, por favor hagan clic en el link que hemos colocado en el chat. En este link lo que se les va a abrir es otra pantalla donde será como una especie de radio, donde ustedes podrán escuchar la interpretación de la presentación y les aconsejo que que pongan en silenciar la ventana de hopping, que lo pueden hacer apachando clic derecho y después poner silenciar este sitio. Para empezar, quisiera agradecer a nuestros patrocinadores y alianzas que hicieron posible este evento. Como otro punto, a su lado derecho pueden encontrar el panel de comunicación. Si hacen clic en la pestaña de sesión, podrán escribir en el chat cualquier duda o comentario, la cual yo llegue al final de la presentación, las leeré con muchísimo gusto. Esta presentación es llamada el Proyecto Global Better Places for People del World Green Building Council. Sería realizada por Catriona Brady, que también forma parte del Green Building Council. Catriona es directora del proyecto Better Places for People del Green Building Council. Es en el que participan más de 30 Green Building Councils alrededor del mundo y producen regularmente entregables líderes en la industria en torno a la salud y bienestar en el entorno construido. Catriona es una reconocida oradora de conferencias internacionales y presenta regularmente en eventos de alto nivel, conferencias de industria y seminarios web. También forma parte de varios grupos de trabajo expertos, incluido el grupo de trabajo WELL sobre COVID-19 y además Catriona lidera la planificación estratégica del World Green Building Council y es responsable de la creación e implementación de la nueva estrategia World GBC, edificios sostenibles para todos en todas partes. Catriona tiene una experiencia de consultoría medioambiental y de sostenibilidad y es una profesional experimentada en la implementación de certificaciones de construcción ecológicas y saludables en el proyecto de todo el mundo. También es una maestra secundaria con experiencia, calificada en geografía, con experiencia adicional en servicios profesionales, además de ser instructora de spinning calificada. Thank you so much, Catriona, for being with us today. We're excited to hear about this project. I will give you the control so you can share your camera, audio, and presentation.
Thank you so much, Juan Fernando, and hi, hola, everybody. I am so sorry to have transitioned to speaking in English. I'm afraid I don't speak very good Spanish at all, so I appreciate you all listening to me in English. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from here in London. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be able to join you today and tell you about the work of the Better Places for People Global Project. Okay, we ready to go? Can you see that, Juan Fernando?
Yes. Yeah, it looks perfect.
Perfect, I'll kick off. Well, thank you again to Guatemala GBC, to Juan Fernando, to Katia, to all of the team for having me to speak today. It's a real pleasure to be able to join you all virtually. I, of course, wish in person. I'd much rather be in Guatemala than in London right now. But to be able to share with you some information about the Better Places for People global project, and most excitingly, the work on health and well-being that we've been collaborating closely with the team at Guatemala GBC on for the past 2 years, that we're launching now in less than 2 weeks' time. So my name is Catriona Brady. I'm head of our global project, Better Places for People, And I also lead global strategic planning at the World Green Building Council. So the World Green Building Council, to give a brief introduction, is a global network of green building councils around the world. We represent around 70 national green building councils, which collectively represents around 36,000 members spread over all continents of the world, and we organise in 5 regional networks. The World Green Building Council network are members of the UN Global Compact. We're looking to achieve the goals of the UN Goals for Sustainable Development and working towards the Paris Agreement. And over the past couple of decades that we've been in existence, this member network has become the strongest local, regional, global action network for the built environment. As I said, through our 70 green building councils, we represent 36,000 organisations, partnerships all over the world, and bringing together the CEOs in an established advocacy and action driving network. Now, this year, we unveiled an exciting new strategy, and I'm sure many of you listening have been through a similar process, perhaps, of looking to align the Sustainable Development Goals to your own corporate strategy or CSR targets. And this is exactly what we did last year. We had recognised the feedback from our members, from the green building councils around the world, that there has been this transition, this shift in the industry away from just looking at green buildings and looking more holistically at sustainable buildings and the sustainable built environment. With that, we recognised that we needed to align to the global framework for sustainability, which is, of course, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so last year, it was part of my job to go through all the 169 targets and 200 and something indicators of the 17 goals to map out which ones of them were most directly relevant to the work of our global network and which ones we could align ourselves to the targets set by the UN for. Hopefully you can see on the bottom of my slide, we selected 11 goals which we felt met these criteria. And then when we amalgamate them into 3 topics, which we call our impact areas, these are the bases, the big bases, the goals of our strategy for the next 3 years until the end of 2022. And that is our network uniting to work together on climate action, resources and circularity, and health and well-being. And as I said, I look after our health and well-being work, so I will be talking to you about that today. So after we set up these 3 impact areas, we had to come up with our mission, our North Star goal for each one of them. And for health and well-being, our vision that we set through a global consultation is for a built environment that delivers healthy, equitable, and resilient buildings, communities, and cities. And some of the language in there I think is so important that when we're talking about health, we're not just talking about health for the single occupant, we're talking about health and equity, health for everyone, and resilience, health long-term, whatever challenges are facing us. And on those geographic scales of buildings, communities, and cities, we're moving away from just looking at singular buildings or projects and looking at much broader scales up to urban planning or master planning scales. So our vision is really growing, and we are delivering that through the Better Places for People Global Project. This project is being participated in by green building councils, including Guatemala GBC, from all over the world. You can see here the GBCs from all 5 regional networks: Europe, the Americas, Asia Pacific, Africa, Middle East, and North Africa. So we have this incredibly internationally rich and diverse set of input on all these topics that relate to health and well-being in the built environment. And in this presentation today, I'm going to go backwards a little bit and tell you, first of all, some background about health and well-being, and then move forwards, take it into the present day context, tell you what we're working on now and what we're releasing that I hope you will find great value from in a couple of weeks' time when it's released onto the industry. So focusing on health, well-being, and the built environment. I always like to start with what I call the rule of 90, two statistics about 90%. The first one, which may not be a surprise to many of us, is that we spend on average 90% of our time indoors. And I think this statistic used to shock people a lot more than it does now in the current time of the coronavirus pandemic, where, of course, many of us all over the world have spent a lot more time inside our homes than we ever have done in our previous lives. I've presented this slide in countries around the world and sometimes been corrected in places that have really extreme climates that they actually spend 99% of their time indoors. That was in Qatar, I was told that. So I think the pattern universally across the world is that we do spend the majority of the time inside our built environment, whether it's our homes, schools, offices, shops, hospitals, whatever the buildings are. We spend the majority of our time inside spaces, and therefore they do have this disproportionate ability to impact our mental and physical health and well-being. And the other half of the rule of 90 is a bit more of a commercial perspective. And that's that if you take the average office-based commercial organization, your average business spends 90% of its overhead costs on people. Now, that is so much more than the cost a business would spend on energy or on rent, which we have used historically to try to demonstrate to the real estate sector that there is a business case, that there is a financial incentive for looking after the health and well-being of people who occupy or visit or work in your building. Now, that might be that they end up paying back any investments made through increased productivity, lower sickness, faster healing times, better educational results. There are patterns that have been shown across buildings of all different typologies, and I'll show you some of these statistics now. So one example is looking at air quality first, a study done by our good friends at the Harvard School of Public Health through their COG-FX studies, was that office workers who work in environments where they're exposed to adequate levels of, or beyond adequate levels of ventilation, where the air has been filtered, the removal of particulate matter, of any pollutants, and there's appropriate circulation and ventilation in the room, that workers in those environments, in comparison to traditional office environments, demonstrate a 101% higher cognitive score in these green buildings versus conventional offices, where they may be more exposed to pollutants or reduced comfort or any of these other factors which are hard to control indoors. Similarly, from this point about air quality, there's also a similar pattern around sick leave, that where employees have been exposed to natural light, there's a benefit on their circadian rhythm, a benefit on their sleeping pattern, on lots of minor health and well-being ailments, headaches, respiratory issues, things like that. Studies have shown time and time again that when people have access to nature, good views, natural light, that they tend to be off sick less. And not just in a commercial environment, but even in the healthcare setting, it's been demonstrated through studies that patients in hospitals who are exposed to, who have connection with nature, have access to views of nature, they have that biophilic effect, that intrinsic connection with nature, views of natural light, that kind of thing, that they heal on average half a day faster with less pain medication, up to 22% less pain medication. And that extrapolated over the size of the nation, the size of the USA, would represent a benefit. Now, in the past 5 years, the World Green Building Council network has worked to demonstrate this business case for healthy, sustainable buildings of all typologies. You can see on my screen on the right-hand side that we've demonstrated the business case in homes, retail, offices, and our most recent report was back in April 2018. Now we're trying to make this information a little bit more digital through the World Green Building Council Case Study Library. This is a library that we launched last year, this time last year actually, So it's 1 year old now. And we now have close to 200 case studies of both healthy and or net zero carbon buildings. So you can come onto this website and search for buildings of different typologies, of different criteria. You can be looking for just healthy and net zero, or net zero in specific geographies. And the idea of this library is to continue building up a bank of case studies so that we can provide inspiration and show best practice to designers, occupiers, and people in the industry all over the world. So if you'd be interested in seeing some of these case studies, please do have a look at the World Green Building Council Case Study Library. That's the link there, worldgbc.org/case study library. And it's also open for submissions. So if you have a building where you can demonstrate through a certification or through performance testing or through other means that your building would meet healthy or net zero criteria, then we would please encourage you to submit it. Whether you're the occupier, designer, architect, consultant, all are welcome to put them forward. So I hope that you'll be able to add some Guatemalan case studies to this library. But moving forwards now, that is the work that the World Green Building Council has done on health and wellbeing in the past 5 years. And it's built up an incredible resource library and a really definitive business case for us to help to persuade the industry that sustainability is a good investment, that looking at the health and well-being of people is a great way to justify potentially heightened costs in sustainability investments that might have a shorter medium-term payback. But over the last 5 years, we have been talking and we've been listening to the green building councils around the world and through to you, their members and the wider industry, and recognized that the future of health and well-being is going to look a little bit more broadly. Now, over the past 2 years, the World Green Building Council has been leading a consultation about changing the definition and redefining the scope of health and well-being. This consultation has gone through the Green Building Councils and their members. It's gone to NGOs around the world. It's gone to corporate partners. We've worked with the World Health Organization, with the UN Global Compact, UN Habitat, UN Environment. We have consulted with so many bodies on health and well-being to help us to redevelop and explore what the concepts of health and well-being in the built environment should really cover. Now, obviously, the list of topics that came out of this consultation was huge. So what we've been working on over the last year is taking all of those topics and uniting them into becoming 6 core principles for health and well-being in the built environment. So why did we decide to do this? As I mentioned at the beginning, strategically, the World GBC Network had seen this transition and away from just looking at green buildings to looking at sustainability more holistically. And so we want to reflect that transition in our work on health and well-being as well as at top strategic level. That work is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals, which of course advocates for those 3 pillars of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. And again, we wanted to bring those 3 pillars into considering the direct and wider impacts on health and well-being from the building and construction sector. Thirdly, we wanted to create a resource, a tool, something that can equip a global audience with high-level information that's relevant internationally for education, for advocacy work, and can create a stepping stone onto further certification. That would, of course, provide a national or international benchmark and show that you've done the adequate performance testing and met design standards. For me, the most exciting and big thing about this framework that shows the transition away from where we've come to where we're going is that our work on health and well-being now is no longer just going to be focused on the occupants, but it's actually advocating for a whole life cycle approach to health and well-being in the built environment. And so we're considering every person impacted directly or indirectly by this sector, whether it's the people working in material extraction or brick production, through to the people working on construction sites, the people occupying buildings, the people living next to the buildings that are occupied, or the people impacted or working on buildings at the end of life stage. We recognize that for too long, this industry and perhaps the certifications that have been developed and popularized as a result of the fact that there's so much awareness on health and well-being, we have all had this focus on building occupants, and we must expand it to consider all of the people that this industry impacts for us to really be able to take this equitable approach to health that we're aspiring for in our North Star goal. So this brings me to where we are today, which is about to launch the World Green Building Council's Health and Wellbeing Framework. And this is a set of comprehensive global guidelines for driving healthy and equitable buildings for everyone, everywhere, bringing that whole life cycle approach. This will be released on the 4th of November of this year, but as I promised to the team at Guatemala GBC, because they have been incredibly involved through the consultation and through the development of this work, I'm delighted to be able to show you today, as an official pre-launch of the framework, what this is going to look like. Now, the slide I'm about to show you is hot off the press. It's not been shown to anybody yet in the entire world, so it's under embargo. But this is what our framework is going to look like when it's released on the 4th of November. As you can see, there are 6 principles that are key to this framework. Those are protecting and improving health, prioritizing comfort, designing and occupying in harmony with nature, the facilitation of healthy behavior, creation of social value, and taking climate action to protect the environment. Now, under each one of these principles, there are a number of topics that sit underneath. We call these our sub-principles. So, for example, under Protect Health, you can see it covers topics like air quality, water quality, mental and psychological health, and infectious disease. That, of course, was added in the last 6 months as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. For me, this framework shows how far this industry and the conversation within it has moved. In comparison to some of the case studies I showed you 10 minutes or so ago, this framework is going to encourage us to look not only at these important issues like air, water, light, biophilic effect, but also to look at things that have that less direct impact on health, like outdoor air quality and the impact of the building sector in terms of global carbon emissions. Positive behavior and health and the way that our buildings and cities are designed to encourage us to live active, healthy lifestyles. The creation of positive social value, looking at human rights chain, the mental and physical health of construction workers, looking at community health, social value and equity. And then from an environmental perspective, it's really important for us to be able to link together our aspirations for net zero carbon buildings and also healthy buildings. We need to move away from having to make a choice between whether you would like your building to be environmentally friendly or friendly for people. We need to be able to demonstrate that sustainable buildings have to do both. And part of the way of bringing this together is for us to take our narrative about climate action and our guidance on net zero and frame it through a health perspective. Because ultimately climate change is a risk to human health. And we must be mitigating climate change. We must be looking to adapt and be resilient to it for the perspective of people's health and well-being and quality of life. It also brings in wider topics like resource efficiency, the circular economy, material health, exposure to toxic chemicals, water efficiency, and so many other factors. So how is all this information going to be portrayed? Now, under each one of these principles, there's obviously a lot of explanation to do. And within the full digital resource, the main way the framework will be published, each one of those topics is going to have a research summary an outcome, a range of strategies organised through different stages of the building and construction life cycle, benchmarks that are high level and global. So, for example, it might be a benchmark based off World Health Organization guidance. And then also a resource list that's been compiled by the World GBC Network, which consists of things like academic articles, rating tools and certifications, journal articles, websites, that kind of content that has been pulled together over the last year by the GBCs and their members and our partners. I actually reviewed the full version of the framework this morning for the last time, and it's over 20,000 words. So it's a long, long piece of work, and that's why it's going to be published digitally, because so many of those resources will be regularly changing and updating, particularly rating tools and academic articles. So this allows us to keep it current, keep the information updated, and also means that we can bring in more information as it's published or as it's updated. However, we don't all want to read a 20,000 word document all the time. So that's why we're also publishing an executive report. This is only 20 pages long. It's going to be much easier to translate and to share. And I'll be working with the GBCs in the Americas regional network to ensure that it's translated into Spanish and also Portuguese. It's going to be much more visual, so there are a lot of graphics like the one I just showed you. And so that will be much easier for us to use in communications, for social media, for presentations, and to be able to explain it in a much more concise way. Both of these resources are going to go live on the 4th of November. The report will be published online through an e-reader and with PDF files. So how do people intend to use the framework? This is a conversation that is really at its infancy, because once we launch it, we are sure that there will be many innovative, new and creative ways to make use of it. But the ideas that have come forward from our Green Building Councils so far are that the framework will be useful as a communications tool for GBCs, for members, for people in the real estate sector, to be able to communicate this full scope of health and well-being in the built environment to a global audience. Secondly is a checklist for GBC members. You can run through all of those sub-principles and you can see which ones that yourself as an organization or a designer or a building occupier are active or know what to do on, or areas that you realize that you hadn't considered before. Thirdly, for certifications, we work very closely with the certifications run by the Green Building Councils around the world, as well as the leading health and well-being certifications, including the team at the Well Building Standard, the team at Reset, and the team behind Fitwell. And we see the framework to be a stepping stone into full comprehensive certification. That's because this is a high-level educational resource, and so we hope people will use it to be introduced to this topic and to learn about the extent of health and well-being considerations that we should be looking at, and then lead people on to pursuing health or sustainability or product or green building certifications, whatever they want to do, to take it to that next level. Fourthly, as an educational resource, this is a resource library that we're going to be publishing online, looking at over 20 different topics. As I said, we'll continue to refresh it, and this is a tool that everybody around the world will be able to access free of charge. And finally, for advocacy work, a number of our Green Building Councils work with city-level, regional, or even national governments' regulatory bodies. And when they're having those conversations around sustainability, we hope that the framework will be a great way to present the categories of health and well-being in the built environment that they should be considering, and potentially offer gap analysis opportunities to think about where, in terms of planning policies, urban planning, construction, design code standards, there needs to be more done to protect the health and well-being of people who are directly or indirectly impacted. So when is it launching? The big news is that we are releasing this on the 4th of November. This is our global launch event, which we have worked very hard with the Green Building Councils around the world to prepare. We'll be joined by an incredible range of keynote speakers on the day, including Dr. Maria Neira from the World Health Organization, Dr. Joseph Allen from the Harvard School of Public Health, and Mr. John Morrison from the Institute of Human Rights and Business, as well as an internationally diverse range of speakers from a number of private sector leaders, from academics, from people at all sides of the building and construction value chain. We're also hosting regional launch events. The one for the Americas will be also happening in November. I'm not sure whether it's the 12th or the 24th of November. I think it might be in the process of changing, but hopefully you'll be able to sign up to that through Guatemala GBC's communications. And this regional event is going to be the opportunity, first of all, to have the event in local language, but also to dig down into the health and well-being topics that are more relevant in a specific geography or specific country, and to talk about the health and well-being challenges that you have in common, as well as be able to bring in experts to share solutions that have worked in other areas of the region or even other parts of the world. So you can sign up for the global event at worldgbc.org/health framework event speakers. You'll see the speaker list there, and that's where the sign up list is too. The communications around the regional launch events will be coming out very soon. So for now, I'm happy to leave it here. I hope that has been a good overview to start off the conversation, and I look forward to taking any questions. Thank you very much again to Katia, to Juan Fernando, and the team at Guatemala GBC for inviting me to speak today, and I look forward to taking any questions now, and would invite any of you to follow up with me via email if you wish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katrina, for this incredible presentation. Now, I will ask the question that they put in the chat. Cualquier pregunta que quieran poner, pueden ponerla en el chat y yo con mucho gusto las puedo traducir y hacérselas a Katrina.
I can see a message in the chat box from Rudy saying, how can we contact Katrina? I'm going to pop my email in the chat box in case anybody wants to reach out to me directly, or you can also get me through LinkedIn.
Yeah, that will be great. I have a question on these, the principles that you're going to do in this manual. Do you have recommendations for each country, or just in general terms, what you should be doing, and then everybody should apply what you can do in the country?
Yeah, great question. So the guidance is international. It's not boiled down to any specific country, and that's so that it doesn't stray into becoming a rating tool, because that's not what we wanted to create. That's what the GBCs run, and that's where their expertise is. So we have intentionally left the guidance and the strategies very high level so that they can be reviewed internationally. Are things that you would aspire for to create internationally. So for example, if you were talking about air quality and source control and ventilation, the outcomes are the same, but it's the strategies that you would want to bring in to achieve that would be different in different parts of the world. And so for a lot of the principles we have under benchmarks and strategies, there are recommendations for different climates, from different international guidance groups or manuals. For example, the World Health Organization does a lot of publications that are regionally specific. So there are quite a lot of anecdotal strategies and benchmarks in there that are specific to one region or climate or geography.
Oh, great. That's incredible. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, you have like, and also imagine that with all the links of the with the page with the site of the World Green Building Council, like you can do like a little research on projects in the region and like identify data strategies, like combining with the principles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what will be good about the online resource is because it's online and you can filter and divide it up. If you wanted to go and look at it and you wanted to only see strategies to implement biophilic design, or you wanted to read some research about health and well-being of construction workers, or see benchmarks for avoiding hydrofluorocarbon emissions from cooling whilst maintaining thermal comfort, you can go into those specific sections and you don't have to read through
Oh, that's
everything.
great. That's great. I kind of like the part that you said that you are going to keep constantly upgrading, if you want to say it like that, all the information that's
Updating and
yeah,
upgrading.
that's really cool because yeah, like you always want to have the new information to apply to the new projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the danger of publishing things as reports. And when I showed you those case study reports earlier in the presentation, that was one of the reasons why we had to transition into having a digital case study library. Because the moment you publish a case study inside a report that's a PDF, that it's printed out and shared, suddenly it becomes out of date very
Yeah.
quickly. So we're realizing now that our information, whether it's case studies, whether it's academic articles or links to rating tools, it needs to be digital so that we can make sure it's up to date.
I totally agree with that. And you can, we will be able to find this in the site of the in the World Green Building Council, right? There's not like an app or something like that. Just
Oh, that's a good idea. There's not an app yet, but that's a brilliant idea. It's the first I've heard of that. I'll suggest that to our team. Yes, it will be through the World Green Building Council website, but for all the green building councils that want to translate the report, that will be made available to them so that it can be translated into local languages. The same can be done to the framework if they wish. So some GBCs might wish to host their own regionally specific versions of it, or to have a button that takes people into the World GBC website that publish a translated version of the report.
great. Well, thank you. Just there is a question. They're asking if in the it's going to have like any section of air quality and if it has any new requirements for the COVID situation.
Brilliant question. Yeah, thank you, Maria. I could sort of translate your question from my basic level Spanish, but thank you, Fernando, for filling in the gaps for me. So yes, principle 1.1 is about air quality. It's our longest principle. It's at least 1,000 words, I think. But that covers both ambient and outdoor air pollution sources, but then also indoor air quality. But it covers really every possible source of indoor air quality that relates to the building and construction sector. So whether that is exposure to toxic materials or and volatile organic compounds, off-gassing from our materials and our furnishings and our fabric, whether it's biological contaminants that come in from damp and mold in humid environments or in temperate climates, whether it's inadequate ventilation and just buildup of toxins and VOCs, whether it's infiltration from outside, every single one of those indoor air quality sources, including humidity and off-gassing of things like radon, are all covered within the guidance of this. So that sits in principle 1.1. And then relating to COVID specifically, as I mentioned, we've been working on this for 2 years. So when we started this project, Principle 1 had 3 sections. It was going to be about air, about water, and about mental health. And then suddenly 6 months ago, we realized that the future of the built environment and the future of health and well-being specifically has to be considering the legacy that COVID has left and the fact that we now are going to be forever aware of the transmission of infectious disease. So now there's a new sub-principle specifically about the transmission of infectious disease, which has some specifics to COVID-19, but also is generally about virus and disease and pathogen control generally. And within that, there is guidance about ventilation, about studies that have been done that's shown, for example, the Harvard School of Public Health study that showed that when people are exposed to higher levels of fine particulate matter, they're more likely to die of COVID. It has strategies about ventilation, but obviously so much of it isn't yet known. So it is guidance at this stage. But then there's also strategies and information about clean surfaces and the ability to use UV lighting and all of these other factors. So there is a lot of content in there currently that is at guidance stage now. But this is one of the other reasons we need to continue updating it so that as more of it becomes solidified and understood, we can make sure we have the most up-to-date information there.
Perfect, Catriona, thank you so much. We are excited for this manual. So I just want to thank you again for finding the time to share with us this incredible project.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I have worked so closely with Katia, with the Guatemala GBC team for a number of years now for us to create this. So I really hope that when we release it, it's something that will be of great value for all of you as members and as real estate professionals, being able to have this tool to advance the sustainability and health conversation.